Hi, Alexi. So lovely to speak with you today. This is Christina from The Upcoming. Congratulations on your film. To start things off, would you like to start by sharing what Special Operation is about and what people can expect going in?
Special Operation is a documentary about the Russian military takeover of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine, which is the site of the worst nuclear disaster in history that happened there in 1986. This film is completely based on the recordings made by surveillance cameras in the Chernobyl nuclear power plant during its military occupation in February and March 2022 by the Russian army.
What sparked the idea for the project?
Well, the Russian invasion itself and the Russian takeover of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, which was such an unprecedented and stupid thing to do. Their luckily short-term presence there, so actually 5 weeks, not that short. I've been following this closely, and also I've been doing research on the Chernobyl zone before the invasion started. So I immediately after the Chernobyl zone was liberated from the Russians, I started to go there to document the aftermath of their presence and collect evidence of the war crimes that they committed in Chernobyl, and this is how I learned about the existence of this CCTV footage that recorded their criminal activities at the nuclear plant.
Speaking of the CCTV footage, you had to go over 1,000 hours of said footage. How did you go about making a documentary that was only 65 minutes out of all of that?
On the first side, this sounds like really a lot of footage, but it could have been much more. And in documentary filmmaking, we are basically used to extracting the essence, through editing from like vast amounts of footage. Yeah, so in that sense, it was not fundamentally different from making documentary, where basically you film sometimes much more footage than ends up in the edit. Yeah, so it's always around maybe, I don't know, less than 1% of the footage compared to what you shot. Yeah, that ends up in the edit. So in this case, the proportion was maybe even more. The disparity was even more high. Yeah, it wasn't very easy, but it was good. It was good actually to have. It was very good to have this big amount of footage. It would be much more difficult to have less.
And why did you choose to not incorporate traditional narration in your documentary?
I didn't choose this. I don't see why this is needed. I'm not interested in what's perceived as traditional documentary films. I think the viewers should be allowed to think for themselves and not be guided in any way. Even though, of course, we're guiding them through editing. And we created a lot of sound elements, like an elaborate sound environment that kind of speaks for itself and lets the footage speak for itself. Yeah, so I think our role as documentary filmmakers is to let things in reality speak and not speak in its name. Yeah.
And what were some of the challenges with covering an ongoing conflict?
Well, the conflict, the war itself is a challenge, yeah, so it affects our lives, and filmmaking is part of our lives, so it is affected. Of course, the biggest challenge in this case was to get our hands on this footage, the CCTV footage that's basically part of a forensic evidence and is part of the ongoing investigation of this crime, of this takeover of Chernobyl plant. And it took us a very long time to negotiate the access to this footage with Office of the Prosecutor General of Ukraine, who is conducting this investigation. It took a lot of time, basically, to get our hands on the footage. So this was really difficult, but this is what made it possible.
Aside from that, did you encounter any other challenges during the filmmaking process?
I think this was the biggest challenge. So once we got our hands on the footage, I think it was pretty much a very big step towards making the film, and it was clear that it's probably going to happen. The challenge that also made the process more interesting and more creative was that this footage was completely silent, so the cameras did not record any sound. As a result, we decided to basically recreate the sound environment, so basically to add the sound that was there but wasn't recorded. Yeah, so everything we see in the frame we used together in collaboration with our sound designer who is like a really outstanding sound artist from Lithuania, Oleksiy Radynski, who basically is he's the co-author of the film in many ways. The sound for the film was created in his studio completely. This was a challenge.
And now that the film is out, what kind of conversations do you hope that it will spark?
The conversations about this kind of dangerous incompetence of the Russian army, I mean, dangerous, that kind of basically this army of criminals, and the army of a criminal state, army of a terrorist state, that is the Russian Federation, and that it's been much feared before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which basically showed that this is not the real army even, and you can see this in the film. There's just a bunch of really incompetent people. Unfortunately, at that stage, when this kind of completely overrated and overblown and like much feared for actually no reason army has not been defeated in Ukraine, which could have been done relatively easily compared to what is going on now. And this hasn't been done because I think the elites in the West made a decision that this shouldn't be allowed to happen. That there will be some assistance to Ukraine, but it shouldn't lead to the collapse of the Russian army for a bunch of reasons. And of course, the main reason is that the Russians were blackmailing like the world with the nuclear escalation, which was basically a kind of farcical kind of bluff. But strangely, this worked with like the Western politicians, and as a result, I mean, things have got much worse. And the Russians have now for the first time actually bombed also the Chernobyl nuclear power plant like last Friday. So I think this also, among other things, could spark the conversations about why was this ridiculously weak army not defeated back then. Why was Ukraine not allowed to defeat this army? Because basically the assistance that it was receiving from the West was very much publicized, but it was really not enough. It was not much actually. And it seems now with hindsight that this was like a deliberate decision.
How do you feel now after seeing your documentary on the big screen at its premiere? Do you want to make more films or documentaries about the same war?
So this is actually already the second documentary on this subject. So I first made a short film about in the Chernobyl zone after the Russian occupation 2 years ago, and it possibly has to be a trilogy. So there could be one more film, not simply about this war, but about this particular situation and the story of Chernobyl. So maybe there will be a third film, and I feel good. I liked seeing the film on the big screen was good. Here, of course, and especially the sound, I could appreciate that the sound that we created here in cinema. I think it worked well.
Thank you.
Thank you.